Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jenna Flanagan. Undocumented in the Big Apple. According to a new report released by the city's comptroller's office, New York City is the capital of President Trump's immigration crackdown, with deportations having surged by 150% citywide since 2016. The staggering statistics show New York City is no longer the sanctuary that it once claimed to be, but instead a target for immigrants. Now, Comptroller Scott Stringer is stepping in and calling on immigration advocates and lawmakers to protect undocumented New Yorkers. And he joins me now to discuss how to do that. Welcome to the show, Mr. Stringer.
Good to be back.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about this report that your office has released. What have you seen about the increase in the number of deportations from people in the city?
Well, first of all, we are a sanctuary city. That's how we were all born and raised here, to believe that no matter where our parents and grandparents came from or when they came here, once they got here, they were part of the future of this city. And to see this president now going after and targeting immigrants in New York City, the sanctuary city, is really incredibly problematic and frightening. We did a report that showed that there's an increase of deportations of up to 150% since 2017. We now see that there's an 88% increase in arrests of immigrants. That's not the aspirational city that we want, and we have to come together as a city and use every tool at our disposal to make sure that we protect the immigrants who come to our city and make such an incredible economic contribution. But this report, I think, is something that people should look at when you see what happens when an entire city is targeted by the White House.
Now, that's actually really interesting, because a lot of people might push back and say, well, you know, there were a record number of deportations under the Obama administration. I mean, a significant number of people were being deported from the country. So what's making this different?
When you really look at what's going on, you see that there's a 265% increase in the number of immigrants who are just being taken off the streets. They didn't commit a crime, they don't have a criminal record, they're just being targeted because they happen to be immigrants. And then that goes against what a sanctuary city is, because when people come here, we don't target people. We don't separate parents from children. We don't do that stuff. We let people live and let live, and then we build our economy around the strong immigrant city that this is. I like to remind people who get confused about this sometimes that immigrants make a tremendous economic contribution to New York City. They earn $100 billion in income every year. They pay billions of dollars in taxes. They're now in media and culture and business. And this city could not thrive without our immigrants.
Considering the fact that New York was supposed to be a sanctuary city, was, at least according to this report, part of the way that that was supposed to work was that the NYPD was not going to be working with organizations like ICE, et cetera, to aid in these deportations. So how is this accelerated so fast if the NYPD is being hands-off?
Well, we have to continue to monitor this. The report did not address the NYPD in this particular report. We have traditionally had a hands-off policy, which I think is very important and critical to remain or to continue to hope to be a sanctuary city. But I think the numbers here show that we have to do more, be more vigilant. One of the things that we can pass is an initiative sponsored by 100 organizations that I've been spearheading, which is to defer or wipe out the amount of money it costs to become a citizen. We estimate thousands of dollars have to be spent. And if you're making very little money, well, what's the choice? You delay citizenship because you want to take care of your children, or you got to pay that extra rent payment. So I want to make sure that we remove the financial barrier to becoming a citizen, and that would go a long way, obviously, to protect people who are here, become citizens, and then drive ICE away, because we have a great path to citizenship.
You know, New York is such a multicultural city, and yet so much about the immigration debate has focused on, or at least the president's focus has been towards Latinos who might be crossing over the border, undocumented, et cetera. What was your report able to find about the kinds or the ethnicity of the immigrants who are actually being targeted and deported?
Well, it's much varied. One thing about ICE, they don't discriminate, they go after everybody. We saw that 20% of the deportations are actually in the Asian community. And that was very surprising because you only think about the Latino community, but people from all different countries are being targeted. This is not just one group of people, but it's a campaign against immigrants in general. And I want to say that the statistic that is just frightening is the one that says that 265% of the deportations are people who just walked down the street, or they went to a court appearance, or they took a child to school. They're doing the right thing, living their lives and contributing to society, and then to be picked off the street in the dead of night or early in the morning, as it's just not the America that we believe it should be.
Well, let me turn, even though this report is about immigration in the city, but turn more to the city and the city budget, because that is something that you've actually weighed in on, and the way that spending should be handled going forward with the city. And I just wanted you to expand on that a little bit.
So the city budget as proposed by the mayor is $92.2 billion. We take a look at that budget through the lens of how we can improve the lives of New Yorkers, and a lot of good initiatives are within that budget. But one of the lessons that we've learned during hard fiscal times is when we have budget cuts, they end up targeting the most vulnerable people in the city, the people who are hanging by a thread, people who are struggling in New York, and those social programs tend to be the first to go. I want to make sure that never happens in tough budget times, and the best way to prevent that is by having a robust savings plan. I applaud the mayor for listening to what our office has been saying for 5 years, by now looking at agencies, finding if there are efficiencies that can save us money. That money gets put away for a rainy day, so if we have a hurricane or a terrorist attack or some unforeseen circumstance which depletes our resources, we're going to be able to hold the foundation in our city together. We have to do more savings, and when you've had 9 years of record surplus, we should not be at the bottom of the savings plan. We should be at the top.
I also wanted to ask you about Thrive NYC. Now, this was a program or initiative that was started with what seems like the best of intentions, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be how things have shaken out. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think Thrive is an important mental health initiative that can make a difference for the city, and I applaud the mayor and the First Lady. It's something that we continually have to focus on. A lot of the people who are languishing in homeless shelters, for example, are also people who suffer mental illness, and we have to address it. While we're addressing it, and we're spending $850 million addressing it, we also have to examine the books to make sure the money is being spent in the ways that it should be, that we're measuring results. That's my job as controller. I audit everybody, Department of Education, Thrive, homeless shelters. I audit because that's my job. So I have to hold the mayor and his administration accountable. When I focus, I find that they do a better job. When I focus on issues of financial accountability, it's what makes our government strong, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, I think financial accountability in government is a great platform to run for mayor on. Is that something?
Well, how about this? It's a great way to honor the commitment I made to people in the city, that I would be an aggressive controller. I would take on the tough fights. I would not be afraid of large corporations or mayoral control or the mayoral government. And I have been an independent steward of our finances, and I take people on because I represent folks in the city who are struggling to get by, and that's the role that I continue to play.
And is that what you believe will help you stand out in the future mayoral race?
You know, that seems to be far away, but as I consider that possible run, the best way that I can show people in the city that I love New York is by doing the job I've been elected to do, and what comes down the road comes down the road.
All right, well, we look forward to following what comes down the road. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.